History is a map, but the cartographers are liars. They draw roads where there are none, and they erase entire continents of truth to keep you from finding the edge of the world. We are taught that King Solomon was a benevolent, wise ruler of ancient Israel. We are told he wrote Proverbs, judged fairly between two mothers fighting over a baby, and built a beautiful temple to God. We are told he was a man of peace. But there is another history. A veiled history, preserved not in the Sunday school Bibles, but in the dusty, forbidden manuscripts of the Middle East. The Testament of Solomon, the Lemegeton, and the Arab chronicles of the Suleiman. In these texts, Solomon is not a saint. He is a warlock. He is not a builder of faith. He is a master of physics. And his wealth did not come from taxes. It came from a terrifying pact he made with forces that exist just outside the spectrum of visible light. To understand the true nature of the world we live in today, a world run by invisible hierarchies and occult banking systems, we must go back to the moment the seal was broken. We must go back to the 0 point of the conspiracy. The story begins in the year 1127, deep beneath the bedrock of Jerusalem. Imagine the scene. The air is thick with the dust of centuries. The heat is suffocating. 9 French knights, the founders of the Templar order, are digging by the light of flickering torches. They are 50 feet underground, beneath the ruins of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They have been digging for 9 years. They are not looking for gold coins. They are looking for a rumor. They are looking for the secret vault that Jewish oral tradition said was buried by Solomon before the Babylonians burned the city in 586 BC. Suddenly, a pickaxe strikes something that doesn't sound like stone. It rings, a hollow metallic thud that echoes through the tunnel. They clear away the limestone debris. They pry open a false wall. And there, sitting in the silence of 17 centuries, is a chamber. Inside the chamber, they do not find the Ark of the Covenant. They find something far more dangerous. They find a collection of scrolls written on skin that does not look like sheepskin. And in the center of the room, sealed with lead and stamped with a strange, 6-pointed star, sits a brass vessel, a jar made of copper and zinc. The knights don't know it yet, but they are looking at the most dangerous object in human history. They are looking at a containment unit. The legends say that when the knights opened the scrolls, they couldn't read the language at first, but as they deciphered the symbols, the blood drained from their faces. These were not prayers. These were schematics. They were diagrams of circles, sigils, and mathematical coordinates used to summon, bind, and command entities from the jinn dimension. And the brass vessel? It was a prison. It was the bottle that held the genie. To understand what the Templars found, and why it made them the masters of the world overnight, we have to travel back another 2,000 years. We have to go back to the source. We have to witness the moment King Solomon received the technology that started it all. The year is roughly 970 BC. Solomon is a young king. He is ambitious, brilliant, and insecure. He wants to build an empire that outshines Egypt and Babylon, but he lacks the manpower. He lacks the technology. He goes to the high place at Gibeon to sacrifice. He asks for wisdom. The Bible says God appeared to him in a dream and gave him a wise and discerning heart. But the esoteric texts tell a more physical story. They say that the Lord, or an entity masquerading as the Lord, sent the archangel Michael to earth with a physical gift. It was a ring. This was not a piece of jewelry. It was a piece of advanced hardware. The Testament of Solomon describes it vividly. It was a ring with a stone set in it, perhaps a crystal or a gemstone not of this earth. Engraved on the stone was the pentalpha, the five-pointed star, or the hexagram, the six-pointed star. Let's apply the semantic pivot. In the 10th century BC, how would a primitive human describe a device that emits a high-frequency control signal? They would call it a magic ring. How would they describe a holographic interface? They would call it a gem that glows. The Ring of Solomon was likely a sonic control device. It operated on the principles of cymatics, the science of sound. Everything in the universe vibrates. Every biological entity has a resonant frequency. If you know the frequency, you can control the entity. You can cause it pain, you can paralyze it, or you can force it to obey. The ring gave Solomon the root access codes to the dimension of the jinn. In Islamic theology, the jinn are not demons in the Christian sense, fallen angels. They are a separate species created from smokeless fire, plasma. They lived on Earth before humans. They are invisible to us, but they share our space. They are powerful, chaotic, and technologically advanced. Solomon didn't pray to them. He drafted them. The first entity he encountered was a minor demon named Orneus. According to the texts, Orneus was draining the life force of the head workman's son, sucking his blood through his thumb, a clear reference to energy vampirism. Solomon confronted the entity. He held up the ring. He didn't say a prayer. He projected the seal. The effect was instantaneous. The entity was paralyzed. The frequency emitted by the ring locked the entity's vibrational state, rendering it helpless. Solomon demanded its name. "I am Orneus," the entity hissed. Solomon didn't banish it. He didn't send it to hell. He gave it a job. "Cut stones for the temple," Solomon commanded. This was the turning point. This was the moment humanity stopped fearing the dark and started exploiting it. Solomon realized that with the ring, he could build an army of invisible labor. He could achieve the impossible. He began a systematic campaign of summoning. He didn't just summon random spirits. He summoned the kings and dukes of the jinn world. He summoned the 72 spirits of the Goetia. But here is the twist that most historians miss. These 72 demons were not just monsters who wanted to eat souls. They were specialists. Look at their descriptions in the Lemegeton, the Lesser Key of Solomon. It reads like a university faculty list. Demon Chart 10, Bauer, teaches philosophy, logic, and the virtues of herbs and plants, a doctor botanist. Demon 28, Bereth, turns copper into gold, a metallurgist, chemist. Demon 29, Astaroth, knows all secrets of the past, present, and future, an intelligence analyst. Demon number 1, Baal, teaches the art of invisibility, stealth tech. Solomon wasn't gathering a circus. He was assembling a cabinet of ministers. He realized that these interdimensional entities possessed knowledge that humanity had lost or never had. They knew how the stars moved. They knew where the gold veins were hidden in the earth. They knew the mathematics of architecture. He enslaved them. He bound them with the ring and forced them to reveal their secrets. He forced them to build the Temple of Jerusalem, a structure so complex, with stones so massive, that modern engineers still struggle to understand how it was done without cranes or hydraulics. But this power came with a terrible risk. You can put a leash on a wolf, but it is still a wolf. The entities hated Solomon. They hated being enslaved by a creature of clay, human. They waited. They plotted. They knew that the ring was the only thing keeping them in check. If Solomon ever lost focus, if he ever took the ring off, the cage would open. And the Templars, digging in the dark 2,000 years later, were about to stumble into the middle of this suspended war. When the Templars found the brass vessel, They didn't just find an artifact, they found the network. They realized that the God who gave Solomon power wasn't a bearded man in the sky. It was a system of universal laws, laws of frequency, geometry, and will. The Templars took the scrolls. They took the technology of the ring, encoded in the geometry of the hexagram, and they brought it back to Europe. Suddenly, the Templars became the richest organization on Earth. They invented banking. They built Gothic cathedrals, which are giant stone resonators. They dominated kings. Why? Because they weren't working alone. They had reopened the connection to the 72 consultants. They had discovered the forbidden grimoire that runs the world. And the first lesson of that grimoire is simple. Power is not given, it is taken. But Solomon's story is a warning, not a blueprint. Because eventually, the magician grows old. The will weakens, and the entities you enslaved begin to whisper promises that sound like freedom, but are actually traps. Solomon thought he was the master. But by the end of his life, he would be building altars to Moloch and burning incense to the very demons he claimed to control. How did the wisest man on earth lose his mind? What did the demons offer him that was worth more than his soul? To understand the fall, we must first meet the demons. We must look into the infernal cabinet and see who exactly Solomon was dealing with. They weren't just spirits. They were the architects of our reality, and they are still here. When you hear the word demon, what do you see? Do you see a red creature with a pitchfork? Do you see a monster hiding under the bed? Do you see the antagonist of a horror movie? This is the cartoon version. It is a caricature designed to keep children afraid and adults ignorant. But King Solomon did not deal in cartoons. He dealt in assets. In the forbidden library of the occult, there exists a text that is considered the user manual of the Solomonic magic. It is called the Lemegeton Clavicula Salomonis, the lesser key of Solomon. To the uninitiated, it looks like a book of nightmares. It lists 72 spirits, describes their grotesque forms, and gives the seals required to summon them. But if you read it with the eyes of a statesman or a CEO, you realize that this is not a religious text. It is a government directory. It lists kings, dukes, presidents, earls, and marquises. It assigns them ranks. It describes their specific skill sets. Solomon wasn't building a cult. He was building a cabinet. He realized that to build the greatest empire the world had ever seen, human labor was not enough. Human intelligence was too limited. He needed engineers who could manipulate matter at the atomic level. He needed astronomers who had mapped the galaxy for millions of years. He needed doctors who could cure diseases that human medicine hadn't even named yet. So he used the ring. He opened the portal. And he drafted the 72 spirits of the Goetia. Let us apply the semantic pivot. The word demon comes from the Greek daemon. In the original Greek, it didn't mean evil spirit. It meant divine power or guiding spirit. It referred to a non-human intelligence that existed between the realm of gods and men. These entities are amoral. They are like electricity. Electricity can light your house or it can stop your heart. It doesn't hate you. It just follows the path of least resistance. Solomon was the electrician. Let's look at the ministers in his cabinet. These weren't monsters who just wanted to eat souls. They were technocrats. Consider spirit number 10, Buer. The text describes him appearing as a starfish or a wheel. But his function? He teaches philosophy, both moral and natural, and logic, and also the virtues of all herbs and plants. He heals all distempers in man. Buer was the Surgeon General. Under his guidance, Israel experienced a medical revolution. He taught Solomon the taxonomy of plants. He taught the chemical properties of roots. He was the father of pharmacology. Consider Spirit number 29, Astaroth. He appears as a hurtful angel riding an infernal beast. But his job? He creates true answers of things past, present, and to come, and can discover all secrets. He will declare wittingly how the spirits fell, if desired, and the reason of his own fall. Astaroth was the director of intelligence. He was the NSA. He knew the history of the cosmos. He knew the secrets of rival kings. With Astaroth bound to the ring, Solomon could not be surprised. He knew the troop movements of the Egyptians and the Babylonians before they even left their barracks. Consider Spirit number 5, Marbas. He answers truly of things hidden or secret. He causes and cures diseases. He creates great mechanical arts. Marbas was the chief engineer. The mechanical arts in the 10th century BC would have seemed like magic. Did Marbas teach Solomon how to build the water systems that irrigated the desert? Did he provide the schematics for the automated lions that guarded Solomon's throne, which legends say could roar and move? And then, there is the most dangerous of them all. Spirit, the Uxa 32, Asmodeus. Asmodeus is the king of the earthly spirits. He is the gambler, the mathematician, the architect of desire. In the Talmudic legends, Asmodeus is not just a servant, he is a rival. He challenges Solomon. But Solomon bound him. Why? Because Asmodeus understood the mathematics of probability. He understood risk. He understood how to manipulate the markets. With Asmodeus as his minister of finance, Solomon accumulated 666 talents of gold in a single year. He rigged the economic system of the ancient world because he had a supercomputer calculating the odds. This changes our entire understanding of the golden age of Israel. We are told it was a time of God's blessing. The veiled history suggests it was a time of technological uplift. Solomon had access to a galactic internet. He could query the database of the universe through these entities. But how did he manage them? How do you hold a conversation with a being that exists in 5 dimensions and views humans as insects? You need a containment field. The Lemegeton describes the triangle of art. When summoning, the magician must stand inside a circle, a protective barrier, and summon the spirit into a triangle placed outside the circle. Why a triangle? In sacred geometry, the triangle creates a specific energetic vortex. It is a Faraday cage for spirits. It forces the entity to manifest in a visible, contained form. Solomon didn't just chant. He used frequency modulation. The secret names of God inscribed on the ring and the circle were not just words. They were vibrational coordinates. He locked them in. He interrogated them. He gave them orders. Build this wall. Find this vein of gold. Teach me the language of birds. And they obeyed. Not because they loved him, but because the ring acted as a shock collar. It caused them unbearable pain if they resisted. Imagine the scene in the throne room. Solomon sits, not in prayer, but in intense concentration. The air hums with static electricity. Shadows writhe in the corners of the room. He is holding court with beings that witnessed the birth of stars. He is extracting information from them like a dentist pulling teeth. It was the ultimate hubris. He believed he was the master. He believed he was the tamer of demons. But he forgot the first rule of keeping wild animals. They never stopped testing the cage. These entities were patient. They were immortal. They had watched civilizations rise and fall for eons. They looked at Solomon, this brilliant, arrogant little man made of mud, and they waited. They waited for his will to slip. They waited for him to get tired. They waited for him to make a mistake. and the mistake he made was intimacy. Solomon began to listen to them too closely. He began to respect them. Some legends say he even began to feel sorry for them. He asked Astaroth, "Why did you fall?" And Astaroth told him a story of a war in heaven, a story where God was the tyrant and the demons were the freedom fighters. It was the first disinformation campaign. The entities began to slowly, subtly corrupt Solomon's worldview. They whispered that they could do so much more if he just loosened the bonds. "We can bring back the dead," they whispered. "We can make you young forever. We just need a little more fuel, a little more blood." Solomon, the wisest man in the world, started to compromise. He didn't notice that the consultants were becoming the directors. He didn't notice that the infrastructure they were building, the massive stones, the strange altars, wasn't just for him. It was for them. They were tricking him into building his own prison. They were tricking him into building a temple that was actually a portal. And the centerpiece of this portal was a technology so advanced, so destructive, that it has been erased from every history book except the Talmud and the highest degrees of Freemasonry. It was the tool they gave him to cut the stone. The shamir. Was it a worm? Was it a laser? Or was it a living piece of radioactive material given to him by Asmodeus? To understand how the impossible temple was built, we must investigate the silent construction. The greatest architectural wonder of the ancient world was not the pyramids of Giza. It was the first temple of Jerusalem. We have all seen the illustrations in Sunday school Bibles. They depict a beautiful building of white stone and gold, sitting peacefully on Mount Moriah. But these illustrations are lies. They are sanitized versions of a structure that was, in reality, terrifyingly alien. If you could travel back in time to the construction site in 960 BC, the first thing you would notice is not the size of the stones. It is the sound. Or rather, the lack of it. Imagine a construction site today. It is a cacophony of jackhammers, saws, diesel engines, and shouting men. It is the noise of violence against the earth. Now, imagine a site where millions of tons of limestone and granite are being quarried, shaped, and lifted hundreds of feet into the air, in absolute silence. This is not a legend. It is a historical anomaly recorded in the Bible itself. 1 Kings 6:7 states clearly, "And the house, when it was in building, was built of stone made ready before it was brought thither, so that there was neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron heard in the house, while it was in building." Stop and analyze the logistics of that sentence. We are talking about Cyclopean masonry. Some of the foundation stones of the Temple Mount, which still exist today, weigh over 500 tons. That is the weight of 3 Boeing 747s. How do you quarry a 500-ton block without a chisel? How do you cut it with such laser precision that you can't slide a piece of paper between the joints? And how do you move it without the grinding of gears or the striking of hammers? The official story says they cut the stones miles away and dragged them. But that doesn't explain the precision. You cannot achieve optical precision with bronze chisels. And it doesn't explain the prohibition of iron. Why was iron forbidden? Was it a religious taboo? Or was it a technical constraint? The veiled history suggests that Solomon wasn't building a church. He was building a resonant machine. And if you are building a machine that operates on magnetic fields or acoustic frequencies, you cannot bring iron, a magnetic metal, near the core. It would cause interference. It would ground the charge. So if they didn't use chisels, what did they use? To find the answer, we must open the Talmud, Tractate Gittin 68a. Here, the rabbis tell a story that sounds like pure fantasy. They claim that Solomon asked his consultants, the 72 demons, how to cut the stone. The demons told him, "There is a creature that exists since the days of creation. It is called the shamir." The legends describe the shamir as a worm or a small living creature about the size of a barleycorn. They say that when the shamir was placed on the hardest stone, the stone would split open exactly as drawn. No dust, no chips, just a clean separation. They say the shamir was so dangerous that it could not be kept in a metal box, or it would burn through it. It had to be wrapped in wool and stored in a leaden box filled with barley bran. Let us apply the semantic pivot. Let us look at the shamir, not with the eyes of a mystic, but with the eyes of a nuclear physicist. What kind of object is the size of a grain, emits a ray that cuts through matter, and must be stored in lead? That is not a worm. That is a radioactive isotope, or a concentrated plasma cutter. Shamir comes from the root word shamer, meaning that which pierces or like a diamond. The worm description is likely a metaphor for a beam of green light that eats through the rock like a worm eats through wood. The wool and barley bran are insulators. Lead is the only metal that blocks gamma radiation. Solomon possessed a piece of Atlantean technology. Perhaps it was a crystal that focused solar energy into a laser, similar to the technologies rumored to exist in the lighthouse of Alexandria. Or perhaps it was a device gifted to him by the entity Asmodeus. The story of how Solomon obtained the shamir reads like a heist movie. He didn't find it. He stole it. He sent his general, Benaiah, to capture Asmodeus, the king of demons. They used the ring to bind him. Under interrogation, Asmodeus revealed that the shamir was entrusted to the prince of the sea, an entity associated with water, cooling, or a specific bird, the woodcock. Solomon's agents raided the nest. They retrieved the capsule. Once the cutting tool was secured, the silence of the quarry was explained. They weren't chipping the rock. They were melting it. They were using high-frequency energy to separate the molecular bonds of the limestone. This process is silent, except for a low hum. It creates no dust. It creates perfect glazed surfaces. But cutting the stones is only half the problem. You still have to move them. Gravity is a harsh mistress. How do you lift a 500-ton block without a crane? This brings us to the second forbidden technology of the temple, acoustic levitation. In the Bible, we are told that the Levites, the priestly class, were organized into massive choirs and orchestras, thousands of trumpets, cymbals, and harps. We assume they were playing music to praise God. But look at the specificity of their instructions. They had to play specific notes, in specific rhythms, at specific times. What if they weren't musicians? What if they were sound engineers? Modern science has proven that sound can levitate objects. We can currently levitate small beads using ultrasonic waves. If you scale up the energy, if you have thousands of instruments playing a coherent frequency, amplified by the geology of the Temple Mount itself, could you generate a standing wave strong enough to nullify gravity? Ancient megalithic sites all over the world, Baalbek, Tiahuanaco, Egypt, share this acoustic connection. They are built with stones that ring like bells, lithophony. Solomon's demons taught him the resonant frequency of stone. Imagine the scene, the silent construction site. A massive block of stone sits on the ground. A choir of Levites stands around it, chanting a low, vibrating tone. The trumpets blast a sharp, dissonant chord. And suddenly, the stone becomes weightless. It floats. It is guided gently into place by a few men using ropes, settling onto the wall with a soft thud. It is magic to the uninitiated. It is physics to the master mason. But there is a dark side to this technology. You cannot handle radioactive materials, the shamir, and high-frequency acoustic fields without consequences. The veiled history suggests that the building of the temple had a body count. The workers who handled the shamir, what happened to them? The Talmud says the shamir became inactive after the temple was destroyed. But it doesn't say what happened to the keepers. Did they die of radiation poisoning? Did their hair fall out? Did their skin blister? Was this the origin of the leprosy that plagued the ancient world? Not a bacterial disease, but radiation sickness? And what was the purpose of this machine? Why build a radiation-proof, acoustically tuned, gold-lined box? You don't build a reactor to hold a book. You build a reactor to hold a fuel rod. The fuel rod was the Ark of the Covenant. We must reevaluate the Ark. It is a wooden box, lined inside and out with gold, conductive metal, insulator, conductive metal. This is the exact definition of a capacitor. A capacitor stores electricity. The Ark was topped with two cherubim made of solid gold, their wings touching. This is the spark gap. The Ark was not a religious relic. It was a weapon of mass destruction. It carried a charge of thousands of volts. This is why Uzzah died instantly when he touched it. 2 Samuel 6:7. He wasn't smitten by God's anger, he was electrocuted. Solomon built the temple to dock the Ark. The Holy of Holies, the inner sanctum, was a perfect cube, 20 cubits by 20 cubits. It was lined with pure gold. This is a Faraday cage. It was designed to contain the immense electromagnetic field of the Ark, to stop it from frying the priests and the city outside. When the temple was finally finished, and the Ark was brought in, something terrifying happened. 1 Kings 8:10-11 describes the activation. And it came to pass, when the priests were come out of the holy place, that the cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud. For the glory of the Lord had filled the house of the Lord. The cloud, the glory. This wasn't smoke. This was ionized plasma. The machine turned on. The connection between the Ark, the capacitor, and the temple, the resonator, was established. The air inside became electrically charged. It glowed with a terrifying brilliance. The priests could not stand, because the magnetic field was so strong, it was interfering with their own biology. They had to flee the room, or die. Solomon stood before this glowing, humming reactor. He had done it. He had used the ring to command the entities. He had used the shamir to cut the stone. He had used the sound to lift the walls. He had built a house for the name of God, but he had made a fatal error. He thought he was the operator of the machine. He didn't realize that the machine was a beacon. When you turn on a light in the dark, you don't just see better, you attract things. The glory that filled the temple was a signal sent out into the cosmos, a signal that said, humanity is ready. We have the tech. Come and get us. And the entities that answered that signal were not the benevolent angels Solomon expected. The 72 demons, currently bound by the ring, watched the temple rise with a cold satisfaction. They knew that Solomon was mortal. They knew the ring would eventually slip from his finger. And when it did, they would have a fortress ready-made for their arrival. Solomon's wisdom was vast, but his ego was bigger. He began to think he could use this power for more than just building. He wanted to know the future. He wanted to know the secrets of life and death. He wanted to breed a successor who would be more than human, a king who could rule not just the earth, but the air. And so, he turned his gaze south. He heard rumors of a queen in Ethiopia, a woman who carried a bloodline even older and darker than his own, a woman who was said to be half jinn. Her name was Makeda, the Queen of Sheba. And when she arrived in Jerusalem, she didn't just bring spices and gold. She brought the genetic key that would unlock the next phase of the conspiracy. The temple was built. The machine was humming. Now it was time to create the pilot. The golden age was about to end. The age of the hybrid was about to begin. And the consequences of that union would lead to the disappearance of the Ark and the collapse of the kingdom. The demons were patient. They knew that the fall of the king is always preceded by a woman. But not just any woman. A woman who reflected the dragon. When the temple was finished, Solomon sat on a throne of ivory overlaid with the finest gold. He controlled the trade routes. He controlled the priesthood. He controlled the 72 entities bound by the ring. But he was bored, and he was worried. He knew a secret that plagues all tyrants. Biology is fragile. Solomon possessed the wisdom of the ages, but his body was mortal. He knew he would die, and he looked at his sons, Rehoboam and the others, and he saw weakness. He saw human frailty. He realized that his magical empire, built on the backs of invisible demons and powered by the radioactive fire of the Ark, could not be inherited by a normal human. A normal human would be consumed by the ring. A normal human would be incinerated by the Ark. To secure the legacy, Solomon needed an heir who was different. He needed a genetic equal, someone who carried the fire in their blood. And then the scouts brought news from the south. They spoke of a kingdom in the deserts of Ethiopia and Yemen, a kingdom ruled not by a man, but by a woman. They said her wealth rivaled his own. They said she worshipped the sun and the moon. But the whispers in the dark corners of the palace said something else. They whispered that she was not entirely human. This was Makeda, the Queen of Sheba, and she was coming to Jerusalem. The Bible portrays this visit as a diplomatic mission, a friendly exchange of riddles and spices. But the veiled history, specifically the Ethiopian Kebra Nagast, the glory of kings, and the Islamic Hadith, paints a picture of a high-level summit between two alien dynasties. In the Islamic tradition, the Queen of Sheba, Bilqis, was rumored to be the daughter of a human king and a jinn mother. The demons in Solomon's cabinet were terrified of her. They warned Solomon, "She has the legs of a donkey." This is a code. It doesn't mean she literally had hooves. It means she carried the marker of the chimera. She was a hybrid. When she arrived in Jerusalem, she didn't come to bow. She came to inspect. She brought 120 talents of gold, a staggering amount, spices, and precious stones. But her real cargo was her DNA. The meeting between Solomon and Sheba was a contest of authentication. The Bible says she came to prove him with hard questions. These weren't riddles like, what walks on four legs? These were security protocols. She asked him about the movement of the stars. She asked him about the secret names of the entities. She asked him about the engineering of the temple. She was checking his clearance level. And Solomon, wearing the ring, answered every question. He showed her the machine. He showed her the house of the forest of Lebanon, his armory. He showed her the automated lions. She was satisfied. "The half was not told me," she said. She recognized him as a fellow initiate of the antediluvian science. And then the negotiation shifted from the intellectual to the biological. Solomon desired her, not just for her beauty, but for her genetics. He realized that if he combined his bloodline, the line of David carrying the frequency of the Hebrew God, with her bloodline, the line of the Jinn star gods, the offspring would be the Kwisatz Haderach of the ancient world, a king who could rule both the material and the spiritual planes. The Kebra Nagast describes the seduction. It wasn't romantic, it was contractual. Solomon tricked her. He made her swear an oath not to take anything from his house. Then, he fed her a meal so spicy, so salty, that she woke up in the middle of the night dying of thirst. She took a drink of water. Solomon caught her. "You broke the oath," he said. "Now you must pay the penalty." The penalty was that she had to sleep with him. This sounds like a petty trick, but in the language of the veiled history, water represents DNA life. She took his water. He took hers. The contract was sealed. Makeda left Jerusalem pregnant. She returned to Ethiopia and gave birth to a son. She named him Menelik, son of the wise man. And as the boy grew, it became obvious that the experiment had succeeded. He was tall, powerful, and possessed a charisma that terrified his tutors. He looked exactly like Solomon, but stronger. When Menelik turned 22, he traveled back to Jerusalem to meet his father. The reunion was shocking. The priests of the temple looked at Menelik and trembled. They said, "Behold, the king has returned young." The resemblance was perfect. But more importantly, the resonance was perfect. When Menelik walked near the Ark of the Covenant, the machine didn't kill him. It hummed. It recognized his biometric signature. He was the authorized user. And this leads to the greatest heist in human history: the theft of the Ark. Solomon knew his time was ending. He knew his other son Rehoboam was a fool who would lose the kingdom. He knew the priesthood was becoming corrupt. He looked at Menelik, the hybrid king, and he made a cold calculation. The technology must survive. If it stayed in Israel, it would be captured by the Babylonians or the Romans. It needed a new bunker. It needed to go deep into the mountains of Africa, protected by a new priesthood of warrior monks. So Solomon allowed it to happen. The Kebra Nagas tells us that Menelik and his entourage, the firstborn sons of the high priests, entered the Holy of Holies in the dead of night. They lifted the heavy golden lid. They didn't take the stone tablets. They took the core. They took the ark. They replaced it with a wooden replica, a decoy, and then they fled south. Some legends say they didn't walk. They say they flew. The ark lifted them up. They covered the journey of 13 days in a single day. Was the ark a propulsion engine? Did they engage an anti-gravity drive powered by the Shamir technology? When the priests in Jerusalem discovered the theft, they screamed, they tore their clothes, they rushed to Solomon. "The glory has departed," they cried. Solomon didn't send an army to pursue them. He told the priests to be silent. He told them to keep the secret. "Let the people believe the ark is still here," he said. "Worship the replica." This was the beginning of the great lie of Judaism and Christianity. For 3,000 years, people have prayed toward the Temple Mount, believing the presence of God was there. But the house was empty. The battery was gone. The spiritual center of the world had shifted to Aksum, Ethiopia. And look at the history. Israel fell. It was conquered by Assyria, then Babylon, then Rome. The temple was destroyed. The people were scattered. But Ethiopia remained unconquered for 3,000 years. It is the only African nation never to be colonized, until the brief Italian occupation in Wwachwaukum. Why? Because they had the weapon. The Solomonic dynasty of Ethiopia ruled unbroken until 1974, ending with Emperor Haile Selassie. They called themselves the Lion of the Tribe of Judah. They guarded the Ark in the Church of St. Mary of Zion in Aksum. To this day, only one man, the guardian, is allowed to see it. And the guardians, they die young. They go blind. They suffer from cataracts and burns. Radiation poisoning? The theft of the Ark left Solomon alone in Jerusalem. He still had the ring. He still had the temple, the shell. But he had lost the engine. And he had lost the only son who understood him. This loss broke him. Solomon's wisdom turned into a dark, consuming hunger. He realized that without the Ark, he needed a new source of power. He needed a new way to fuel the magical infrastructure of his empire. The clean energy of the Ark was gone. Now, he had to switch to dirty energy. He had to switch to blood. And to pay for the blood, to pay the mercenaries and the demons who were now demanding payment for their services, he needed gold. Not just a little gold, he needed mountains of it. The taxes of Israel were not enough. He needed the mines of Ophir. Historians have searched for Ophir for centuries. They looked in India, they looked in Arabia. But the veiled history suggests that Solomon's fleet, piloted by the Phoenicians and guided by the star maps of the Jinn, went much further. They went to a place where the rivers ran with gold, but where the price of extraction was the soul of the miners. Solomon was about to become the first globalist, and the cost of his gold would be the blood of children. In the book of 1 Kings, chapter 10, verse 14, there is a statistic that has made theologians uncomfortable for centuries. It states, "Now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold." 666 talents, approximately 25 tons of gold, in a single year. Why does the Bible use the number of the beast, 666, to describe Solomon's wealth? Is it a coincidence? Or is it a warning? The veiled history suggests that this specific number is a code. It signifies that the gold of Solomon was not clean. It was not the product of fair trade or honest taxation. It was the product of a Faustian bargain. To understand the source of this wealth, we must solve the greatest geographical mystery of the ancient world. Where was Ophir? The Bible tells us that Solomon built a navy at Etzion-Geber on the Red Sea. He partnered with Hiram, the king of Tyre, the ruler of the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were the masters of the ocean. They knew the secret currents. They knew how to navigate by the stars. Together, they launched a fleet of ships of Tarshish. The Bible says, "For the king had at sea a navy of Tarshish with the navy of Hiram. Once in 3 years came the navy of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver, ivory and apes and peacocks. 3 years. This is the critical data point. A voyage from the Red Sea to India takes a few months. A voyage to East Africa takes weeks. A 3-year round trip implies a journey of immense distance. It implies crossing an ocean. Where can you go that takes 3 years to return? You can go to the Americas. Mainstream history tells us Columbus discovered America in 1492. The veiled history laughs at this. Solomon and Hiram discovered the land of gold 2,500 years earlier. They called it Ophir. Some linguists suggest Ophir is the root of Peru or Upar in native Amazonian dialects. Let's look at the forensic evidence. In 1872, a slave on a plantation in Paraíba, Brazil, found a stone tablet with strange engravings. When scholars translated it, they realized it was Paleo-Hebrew or Phoenician. It read, "We are sons of Canaan from Sidon, the city of the king. Commerce has cast us on this distant shore, a land of mountains." The Paraiba stone was immediately declared a hoax by academics who couldn't handle the truth. They destroyed the original. But copies survived, and in recent years, similar inscriptions have been found in Tennessee, the Bat Creek Stone, and in the Amazon. Solomon's fleet didn't just hug the coast. Guided by the star maps provided by the Jinn, specifically the demon Astaroth, who teaches all secrets of the past and future, they crossed the Atlantic. They reached the Amazon. They reached the Andes, and there they found what they were looking for. Not just gold dust in the river, but massive, deep veins of the metal of the gods. But you don't extract 25 tons of gold a year with pickaxes. You need an industrial operation. You need a workforce. Solomon didn't use his own people. He used the Canaanites and the indigenous populations he encountered. He built the first black sites. The mines of Ophir were not mines. They were meat grinders. Mining is a dangerous business. In the ancient world, it was a death sentence. The heat, the darkness, the toxic gases. But Solomon had a problem. The earth doesn't give up its gold willingly. In the occult worldview, gold is the blood of the earth. It is guarded by elemental spirits, gnomes, or what the miners called knockers. To extract such massive quantities, you have to pay a tax to the entities of the underworld. The entities bound by the ring, the 72 demons, facilitated this transaction. They told Solomon, "If you want the gold to flow, you must feed the earth." And so, the sacrifice began. The veiled history suggests that the mining colonies of Ophir operated on a system of ritual slaughter. Before a new shaft was opened, slaves were executed. Their blood was poured into the fissures of the rock to lubricate the extraction. This was the origin of the dark rituals we later see in the Aztec and Mayan cultures, who may have learned it from these visitors. The gold that came back to Jerusalem was heavy with this karmic debt. It was blood gold. It carried a vibration of suffering. When the ships returned to Ezion Geber after 3 years, their hulls were low in the water. They brought exotic animals, apes and peacocks, creatures from the jungle. But the sailors who returned were different. They were hollow-eyed. They were haunted. They had seen the edge of the world, and they had seen the cruelty required to rule it. Solomon took the gold. He used it to plate the walls of the temple. He used it to make 500 golden shields. He used it to make a throne of ivory. He effectively cornered the global gold market. Silver became as common as stones in Jerusalem. But this wealth had a side effect. Gold is a conductor. It conducts electricity, but it also conducts spiritual influence. By filling his palace and his temple with metal that had been ripped from the earth through torture and demon-brokered deals, Solomon was inadvertently building a massive antenna for negative energy. The 666 talents were a signal that the kingdom of Israel had been sold. Solomon thought he was the master of the demons because he held the ring. But the demons knew that greed is a stronger chain than any brass ring. They didn't need to force him anymore. He was doing their work for them. He was building an empire based on materialism, slavery, and the accumulation of power at any cost. He was turning Jerusalem into Babylon. And as the gold piled up, Solomon's mind began to fracture. He started to hear whispers, not from the ring, but from the gold itself. The foreign women he married, the daughters of Pharaoh, the Moabites, the Ammonites, they brought their own gods with them, gods like Moloch and Chemosh. These were not subtle gods. They didn't want incense. They wanted flesh. And Solomon, the wisest man in the world, the man who had built a house for Yahweh, found himself walking out to the Mount of Olives and drawing the blueprints for a new kind of altar. An altar with a furnace in its belly. The transition was complete. The King of Light had become the Sorcerer-King. The gold of Ophir had bought him the world, but the receipt was coming due, and the demons were about to call in the debt. The fall of Solomon wasn't a political collapse. It was a spiritual possession, and the entity that took the throne wasn't a man anymore. There is a rule in physics and in magic that cannot be broken. It is the law of entropy. Systems degrade. Batteries run dry. Fires burn out unless you feed them. King Solomon had built the most advanced empire in human history. He had automated the construction of cities with the Shamir. He had manipulated the global economy with the foresight of Asmodeus. He had mined the gold of Ophir using the navigation of the Jinn. But by his 40th year, the machinery of his empire began to shudder. The ring of power, the sonic control device given to him by the Lord, was losing its charge. The entities he had enslaved for decades were growing restless. The frequency bonds that held them in the brass vessel and the triangle of art were weakening. They were no longer content with building walls. They wanted payment. And interdimensional entities do not accept gold. Gold is a conductor, not a fuel. They eat life force. The Bible, in 1 Kings 11, describes Solomon's fall with a polite euphemism. It says, "For it came to pass, when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods." It lists these gods: Ashtoreth of the Sidonians, Chemosh of the Moabites, and Moloch, the abomination of the Ammonites. Historians interpret this as a midlife crisis. They say Solomon became tolerant or senile, but the veiled history suggests a much darker reality. Solomon didn't build these altars because he wanted to. He built them because he had to. The demons had presented him with a bill. "We have served you," they whispered from the shadows of the throne room. "We gave you the world. Now feed us, or we will tear your kingdom apart." Solomon was a hostage in his own palace. To keep the lights on, to keep the magical iron dome protecting Israel from its enemies active, he had to upgrade the fuel source. He had to switch from sonic control to blood sacrifice. And so, on the Mount of Olives, directly across from the holy temple of Yahweh, Solomon commanded his engineers to build a new kind of machine. It wasn't a temple of silent stone, it was a furnace. This was the Tophet, the altar of Moloch. Let us strip away the mythology and look at the mechanics of Moloch. It was a colossal hollow statue made of bronze. It had the head of a bull, symbol of power, virility, and the body of a man. Its arms were outstretched, palms up, sloping backward toward its open chest. Inside the belly of the statue, a massive fire was lit. The bronze would heat up until it glowed cherry red. The ritual was specific. It required the sacrifice of the firstborn. Why the firstborn? Why children? This is the most horrific calculation of the occult. An adult has spent much of their life force. Their potential is collapsing into memory. But a child is pure potential. A child contains decades of unlived time, unspent energy, and biological vitality. In the thermodynamics of the spirit world, a child is high-grade nuclear fuel. Solomon, the man who once judged between two mothers to save a baby, now presided over rituals where babies were passed through the fire. The ancient texts describe the scene. The priests beat drums loudly. Historians say the drums were to drown out the screams of the parents. But the veiled history suggests the drums were a sonic carrier wave. Rhythmic drumming puts the brain into a trance state, theta waves. It synchronizes the heartbeat of the crowd. When the child was placed on the searing hot arms of the bronze machine, the sudden release of agony, the ultimate loosh, was captured by the metal. amplified by the fire and directed by the drums into the ether. It was a feeding trough for the 72 demons. Asmodeus, Baal, Paimon, they feasted on the smoke of Jerusalem, and in return, they kept Solomon on the throne. They kept the gold flowing from Ophir. They kept the armies of Egypt at bay. But the price was the soul of the nation. This transition from white magic, technology's ring, to black magic, sacrifice, Moloch, drove Solomon insane. The Testament of Solomon describes his paranoia. He began to see demons everywhere. He wrote that he was no longer the king. He was merely the jailer of a zoo that was about to riot. There is a terrifying legend in the Talmud known as the usurper. It says that one day, Solomon was alone with Asmodeus. In a moment of arrogance, Solomon asked the demon, "What is the difference between your power and mine?" Asmodeus smiled. "Give me the ring, and I will show you." Solomon, drunk on his own hubris, took off the ring and handed it to the entity. Instantly, Asmodeus grew to a giant size. He grabbed Solomon and threw him 400 miles away into the desert. Then Asmodeus shapeshifted. He took on the face and voice of Solomon. He put on the ring. He sat on the throne. For years, the legend says, a demon ruled Israel while the real Solomon wandered the world as a beggar, screaming, "I am the king," to people who thought he was mad. Apply the semantic pivot. Did a demon literally throw him? No. This is a metaphor for possession. There came a point where the personality of Solomon the Wise was completely suppressed by the demonic consciousness he had invited in. The entity became the king. The man on the throne looked like Solomon, but he acted like a monster. He taxed the people to death. He enslaved his own citizens to work in the mines. He expanded the harem to 1,000 women. A breeding program? The Golden Age turned into a nightmare state. Jerusalem became the capital of the occult world. The temple of Yahweh stood silent and empty since the ark was gone, while the smoke of the Tophet blackened the sky. The people of Israel, once the chosen people, were now the batteries for a Sorcerer-King, and they broke. When Solomon finally died, or when his body finally gave out, the system collapsed instantly. His son Rehoboam tried to keep the machine running, but he didn't have the ring. He didn't have the pact. The 10 northern tribes revolted. They said, "What portion have we in David? To your tents, O Israel." They weren't just protesting taxes. They were fleeing a death cult. The kingdom split. The infrastructure crumbled. The glory faded. But the information did not disappear. Before the end, in his moments of lucidity, Solomon realized what he had done. He realized he had opened a door that could never be fully closed. He knew that the ring would be lost. He knew the brass vessel would be buried. But he wanted to leave a record. He wanted to leave a warning or perhaps a guide for the future. He sat down and wrote the Grimoire. He documented the sigils. He wrote down the names of the 72 entities. He recorded the frequencies required to bind them. He wrote the Key of Solomon. He didn't write it to help humanity. He wrote it because knowledge is a virus, and it wants to spread. He sealed the book. He hid it in the deepest vault, perhaps alongside the brass vessel itself. He thought he was burying it forever. But he forgot the lesson of the Shamir. Whatever is hidden will eventually be dug up. The demons waited in the dark. They waited for 1,000 years. They waited for the Babylonians to leave, for the Greeks to leave, for the Romans to leave. They waited until a group of 9 French knights with shovels arrived in 1118. Solomon was dead, but his cabinet was immortal. And when the Templars opened that vault, the 72 consultants didn't scream. They whispered, "Welcome back. We have been waiting for new management." The altar of Moloch had been destroyed, but the blueprint survived. And as the Templars would soon discover, the price of the magic hadn't changed. It still cost blood. But the story doesn't end in the dirt of Jerusalem. The book, the Testament, began a journey of its own. It moved through the hands of the most powerful men in history, leaving a trail of fire and madness wherever it went. It traveled to Rome, to the Vatican. Why does the Catholic Church, the sworn enemy of demons, possess the largest collection of grimoires in the world? Why did the popes study Solomon? Because you cannot rule the world with just prayer. To rule the world, you need the ring. When a king dies, his crown is passed to his son. His lands are divided. His gold is counted. But what happens to his passwords? King Solomon died around 931 BC. According to the Bible, he was buried in the city of David. But the veiled history suggests that before his body was cold, a frantic search began in the royal chambers. The priests, the scribes, and the terrified courtiers weren't looking for his will. They were looking for the black box. They were looking for the Testament, the manuscript where Solomon had recorded the summoning codes, the sigils, and the binding frequencies of the 72 entities. They knew that without the book, the magical iron dome protecting Israel would collapse. Without the codes, the demons bound in the brass vessel would eventually wake up and realize the jailer was dead. The kingdom was sitting on a ticking time bomb. Legend says that the book was found, but it wasn't Rehoboam, the foolish heir, who took it. It was Hezekiah, a later king of Judah. The Talmud records that Hezekiah found the Book of Cures, Solomon's magical text, and hid it. Why? Because it was too dangerous. It worked too well. People stopped praying to Yahweh for healing because the book's formulas cured them instantly. The spiritual economy of the temple was crashing because the technology of the book made faith obsolete. So Hezekiah initiated the first cover-up. He didn't burn it. You don't burn a nuclear weapon, you might need it later. He buried it deep in the royal archives. But information wants to be free. And in 586 BC, the firewall was breached. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, smashed the gates of Jerusalem. He burned the temple. He dragged the Jewish elite into captivity in Babylon. We are taught that the Babylonian captivity was a time of sorrow. The Jews sat by the rivers of Babylon and wept. But for the keepers of the book, it was a data merger. Babylon was the capital of magic. The Chaldean magi were the masters of astrology and necromancy. When the Jewish priests arrived with Solomon's grimoire hidden in their robes, they didn't just hide it, they updated it. They compared notes with the Babylonians. They merged the Solomonic summoning protocols with the ancient Sumerian demonology. This fusion created a new operating system, the Kabbalah. Specifically, the practical Kabbalah, the art of using names and numbers to manipulate reality. The grimoire survived the exile. It survived the return to Jerusalem. But its journey was just beginning. It was about to jump from the Semitic world to the Western world, and the vehicle for this transfer was the greatest city of the ancient world, Alexandria. In the 1st century AD, a text appeared in the Greek-speaking world titled the Testament of Solomon. Historians call it pseudepigrapha, fake writing. They say it was written by a Greek Christian who just used Solomon's name. But apply the layered consensus. Why does the text contain specific names of demons, Ornias, Onoscalis, Asmodeus, that appear nowhere else in Greek literature? Why does it contain precise astrological alignments that date back 1,000 years? The Testament wasn't a forgery. It was a translation. It was the leaked document of its time. It described in first-person detail exactly how Solomon built the temple. It gave the names of the demons. It gave the formulas to bind them. It became the underground bestseller of the Roman Empire. Every sorcerer, every alchemist, every Gnostic wanted a copy. But the Roman Empire had a new state religion, Christianity, and the church had a strict policy regarding magic. Burn it. In the Book of Acts, 19:19, we read about the burning of the magical books in Ephesus. Many of them also, which used curious arts, brought their books together and burned them before all men. And they counted the price of them and found it 50,000 pieces of silver. 50,000 pieces of silver. Millions of dollars in today's money. This was a massive, coordinated purge. The church was trying to wipe the hard drive of civilization. They hunted down the Gnostic Gospels. They hunted down the Egyptian scrolls. And they hunted down the Testament of Solomon. But here's the paradox that reveals the conspiracy. If the church hated magic so much, why does the Vatican have the largest collection of grimoires in the world? You would expect the Vatican Library to be full of Bibles. But in the secret archives, Archivio Segreto Vaticano, there are shelves upon shelves of forbidden books. The Picatrix, the Sworn Book of Honorius, the Grand Grimoire, and the original manuscripts of the Key of Solomon. They didn't burn the master copy. They confiscated it. The church realized early on that power is a zero-sum game. If the peasants have the book, they don't need the priest. If the peasants can summon Buer to heal their sick child, they won't pay the church for a miracle. So they banned magic for the public, but they privatized it for the hierarchy. This transition occurred during the collapse of Rome. As the legions failed, the popes took over. They inherited the infrastructure of the empire, and they inherited the Solomonic Technology. Look at the papal regalia. The pope wears a ring, the ring of the fisherman. Tradition says it represents Peter, but esoteric theory suggests it is a symbolic replacement for the ring of Solomon. The pope claims the power to bind and loose on earth and in heaven. This is the exact language used in the grimoire. I bind you, spirit, and I loose you to do my will. The Vatican became the new fortress of Solomon. They built St. Peter's Basilica using the same principles of sacred geometry and acoustic resonance as the first temple. They filled it with gold. They built a massive obelisk in the center of the square, an Egyptian antenna. But the book didn't just sit on a shelf gathering dust. In the Middle Ages, a strange phenomenon emerged. The greatest magicians in Europe weren't pagans living in the woods. They were priests. They were monks. They were abbots. They were popes. This is the era of clerical necromancy. The veiled history reveals that the clergy were the only people who could read Latin and Hebrew. They were the only ones with access to the libraries. While they preached against demons in the daylight, they were summoning them by candlelight in the crypts of the monasteries. They told themselves they were doing white magic. They claimed they were using the name of Jesus to compel the demons to do good work. We are binding the devil to serve the church, they said. It was the same arrogance of Solomon all over again. And the text that guided them was the Clavicula Salomonis, the Key of Solomon. It became the blueprint for all medieval magic. If you wanted to find treasure, you used the key. If you wanted to make a woman love you, you used the key. If you wanted to kill your enemy, you used the key. The book had survived Babylon. It had survived the Roman fires. It had survived the Dark Ages. It was indestructible. It was a mimetic virus. It infected the minds of the ambitious. But the most shocking revelation is not that the priests used it. It is that the popes wrote their own versions. This leads us to the figure of Pope Honorius III, 1216–1227. Official history says he was a pious administrator who approved the Dominican and Franciscan orders. But the underground history attributes to him the Grimorium Verum, the Grimoire of Truth, or the Sworn Book of Honorius. This text is a manual on how to summon the beatific vision, God, but it includes long lists of demons and how to control them. It opens with a chilling statement. The Holy Apostolic Seat, to whom the keys of the kingdom of heaven are given, alone possesses the power to command the Prince of Darkness. This is the confession. The Vatican admits, in its own secret literature, that it holds the leash of the devil. They positioned themselves as the Solomon of the New Age. So the grimoire traveled from the excavation under the temple, chapter 1, through the hands of the Templars, and straight into the private library of the Vicar of Christ. The Templars were burned for using it. The Pope kept it. It was a hostile takeover of the technology. But you cannot keep a book like that secret forever. The invention of the printing press in the 1400s shattered the Vatican's monopoly. Suddenly, the Key of Solomon wasn't just a manuscript locked in Rome. It was being copied. It was being translated into French, English, and German. It leaked into the hands of the natural philosophers, men like John D., Agrippa, and Giordano Bruno. These men weren't priests. They were scientists. They looked at the sigils and saw geometry. They looked at the names and saw frequencies. They began to strip away the religious language. They began to approach the 72 demons not as spirits of hell, but as forces of nature. This was the birth of modern science. Science didn't come from rejecting magic. It came from rationalizing it. Sir Isaac Newton, the father of physics, spent more time translating the Emerald Tablets and studying the dimensions of Solomon's temple than he did on gravity. He was looking for the code. The grimoire had mutated again. It had moved from the temple to the church, and now to the laboratory. And the entities, the 72 consultants, they didn't care who held the book, priest, king, or scientist. As long as someone was willing to open the door, they were willing to step through. But there was one specific group that took the Solomonic tradition and built an entire society around it. A society that didn't just read the book, but acted out the ritual of the lost word and the murdered architect in every lodge meeting. The Freemasons. They claimed to be the heirs of Hiram Abiff, the builder of Solomon's temple. And in their highest degrees, the Royal Arch. They claimed to have found the secret vault and the ineffable name buried beneath the ruins. The grimoire didn't disappear. It was just cut up into pieces and hidden in the rituals of the lodge. And the men who wear the apron today, the men who lay the cornerstones of our government buildings, they are still following the blueprints drawn by the demons in 960 BC. The survival of the Testament is the single most important thread in the history of the occult. It proves that there is a continuous lineage of black magic running parallel to the history of Western civilization. We live in a world built by Solomon. We obey laws derived from his structure. We use money invented by his demons, and the book is still here. You can buy it on Amazon today. But be careful, because the warning on the first page is not a metaphor. He who opens this book opens a door, and he who opens a door must be prepared for what enters. If you walk into St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, you are overwhelmed by the gold, the marble, and the incense. It is designed to make you feel small. It is designed to make you feel the presence of the divine. But if you walk a few hundred yards to the west, you reach a heavy iron gate. Behind that gate lies the Archivio Segreto Vaticano, the Vatican Secret Archives, 53 miles of shelving, 35,000 volumes. We are told this is just a collection of administrative records, papal bulls, and letters. But the veiled history asks, why is it the most guarded fortress of information on earth? If the Church has the truth, why hide it? The answer is that the archives do not just contain the history of the Church. They contain the history of magic. For centuries, the Catholic Church has burned witches. They have burned heretics. They have burned scientists. They publicly declared that any interaction with demons was a mortal sin punishable by death. But privately, the popes were the greatest necromancers in Europe. This is the Vatican paradox. The Church didn't destroy the Key of Solomon. They confiscated it. They translated it. And they used it. They realized that the Solomonic Technology, the ability to bind and command spiritual entities, was too powerful to be left in the hands of the peasantry. It had to be a state monopoly. To understand the depth of this conspiracy, we must look at the figure of Pope Sylvester II, Gerbert of Aurillac, who reigned from 999 to 1003 AD. History calls him the mathematician pope. He introduced the abacus and Arabic numerals to Europe, but legends call him the sorcerer pope. Gerbert didn't study in Rome. He studied in Islamic Spain, Al-Andalus, in the cities of Córdoba and Seville. At that time, the Islamic world was the guardian of the ancient texts. While Europe was illiterate, the Arabs were translating Aristotle, Plato, and Solomon. Gerbert learned the forbidden sciences. He learned astrology. He learned the mechanics of the astrolabe. And according to the chronicler William of Malmesbury, he stole a grimoire from an Arab philosopher. When Gerbert returned to Rome and became pope, he didn't bring just books. He brought a brazen head. Does this sound familiar? Centuries before the Templars were accused of worshipping a head, Pope Sylvester II possessed one. It was described as a mechanical automaton made of brass that would answer his questions. It operated on binary logic. It would only speak when spoken to, and it would only answer yes or no. The Pope consulted this demon on matters of state. He asked it, "Will I be Pope?" The head answered, "Yes." He asked it, "Will I die before I say Mass in Jerusalem?" The head answered, "No." This wasn't a miracle. This was Solomonic tech. Sylvester II had reconstructed the communication devices of the ancient world using the schematics found in the Arab translations of Solomon's works. He was the first technocrat to sit on the throne of Peter. But Sylvester was just the beginning. As the Middle Ages progressed, the line between priest and wizard vanished completely in the upper echelons of the Church. Enter Pope Honorius III, 1216–1227. Official history remembers him as a pious man who sanctioned the Dominican and Franciscan orders. But in the underground world of the occult, he is the author of the most infamous text in existence. The Sworn Book of Honorius, Liber Juratus. This book is not a Bible. It is a manual on how to summon the beatific vision, God, by compelling angels and demons to appear. It contains the sigil of God, Sigillum Dei Ameth, a complex geometric diagram used to gain mastery over all creatures. Why would a pope write a grimoire? Because he believed in the divine right of command. The Church operates on the principle of apostolic succession. The Pope claims to hold the keys of Peter. But the veiled history suggests that the keys of Peter are actually the keys of Solomon. The Church reframed the Solomonic ritual. Instead of summoning, they called it invocation. Instead of binding, they called it exorcism. But the mechanics are identical. Look at the Roman ritual of exorcism. The priest wears a stole, a symbol of authority, like the ring. He uses holy water, salt and water, the elements of earth and sea. He draws a circle of protection, often invisible or marked by the sanctuary. And he commands the entity, exorcisemus te, omnis immundus spiritus. He demands the demon's name. Why? Because Solomon taught that if you know a spirit's name, you own it. Once the name is given, the priest commands the spirit to leave or to obey. This is not prayer. Prayer is a request. Exorcism is a command. It is pure, unadulterated Solomonic magic. The church simply branded it as holy, so they could be the only ones allowed to use it. But the rabbit hole goes deeper. There is a rumor that has persisted for centuries about a specific book hidden in the deepest vault of the Vatican Archives. A book that is so dangerous, only the Pope and his Grand Exorcist are allowed to see it. It is called the Grand Grimoire, or the Red Dragon. This book does not just teach how to bind minor spirits. It teaches how to summon Lucifuge Rofocal, the Prime Minister of Hell. The text details a pact. It allows the magician to form an alliance with the entity to secure worldly power, wealth, and invincibility. Is it possible that the Vatican is not the enemy of the 72 demons, but their employer? Let's apply the cosmic zoom out. Look at the structure of the Catholic Church. It is a global empire. It has hoards of gold, the Vatican Bank. It influences billions of minds. It has outlasted every kingdom in history. How? Is it purely by faith? Or is it because they have consultants? The architecture of the Vatican is a giant talisman. St. Peter's Square is a massive elliptical sundial with an Egyptian obelisk in the center. The obelisk was brought from Heliopolis, city of the sun, by Emperor Caligula. It was originally dedicated to the sun god. The Pope put a cross on top of it, but he didn't destroy it. Why? Because the obelisk is an antenna. It is a needle of the earth used to channel telluric currents. By placing the seat of the church directly on top of this pagan technology, the popes were ensuring that the current of Solomon flowed directly into the basilica. And what about the fish hat, the mitre? The Pope wears a tall, two-pointed hat. Catholic dogma says it represents the tongues of fire from Pentecost. But look at ancient Sumerian carvings. The priests of Dagon, the fish god, wore the exact same hat. It represents the open mouth of a fish. Solomon traded with the Phoenicians and the Philistines, who worshipped Dagon. Did the priestly vestments of the Vatican originate in the demon-worshipping cults of the ancient Near East? The evidence suggests that the Vatican is a hermetic vessel. It is a shell of Christianity wrapped around a core of ancient, pre-Christian magic. The popes knew that the God of the masses, the gentle carpenter from Galilee, was useful for controlling the sheep. But for controlling the wolves, the kings, the armies, the demons, they needed the God of Solomon. They needed power. But maintaining this monopoly is exhausted. Throughout history, the Vatican has had to fight a constant war to keep the Grimoire secret. They burned the Cathars. They burned the Templars, who tried to build their own version of the Solomonic Temple. They burned Giordano Bruno. They weren't killing heretics. They were killing competitors. They were eliminating anyone else who figured out how to use the ring. But technology eventually leaks. By the 1700s, the Church's grip was slipping. The Enlightenment was beginning. Men of science were starting to ask questions, and a new group emerged from the shadows. A group that claimed to be the true heirs of Solomon's builders. They didn't wear robes. They wore aprons. They were the Freemasons. And they claimed that while the Church had the books, The Masons had the geometry. They claimed that they possessed the lost word that could activate the temple without the need for a pope. The grimoire was about to change hands again. It was moving from the altar to the lodge, and the 72 demons were preparing for a new kind of assignment. They were done with religion. They were ready for politics. If you walk down the main street of almost any town in America or Europe, you will see a building with no windows on the ground floor. Above the door, there is a symbol, a square and a compass, often with the letter G in the center. This is the Masonic Lodge. To the public, the Freemasons are a benign fraternity. They hold charity pancake breakfasts. They drive tiny cars in parades. They are seen as a social club for aging men. But this is the exoteric, outer face. It is a camouflage designed to make the organization look harmless. The esoteric, inner reality is very different. Freemasonry is not a club. It is a school of Solomonic engineering. Every single ritual, every symbol, and every password used in the lodge is derived directly from the construction of King Solomon's temple. When a Mason enters the lodge, he is not entering a meeting room. He is stepping into a holographic simulation of the temple floor in Jerusalem, circa 960 BC. He stands between two pillars, Jachin and Boaz. He walks on a checkered floor, black and white tiles. He looks toward the east, the rising sun, Solomon's chair. Why? Why are millions of men across the globe reenacting a construction project from 3,000 years ago? Because the temple they are building is not a physical building. It is a machine, and the Masons are the custodians of the blueprint. The core myth of Freemasonry, the story that is acted out in the third degree, Master Mason, is the legend of Hiram Abiff. According to the ritual, Hiram was the grand architect of Solomon's temple. He was the only man, besides Solomon and Hiram king of Tyre, who knew the master's word. This word was not a password. It was the sonic key. It was the precise frequency required to activate the shamir, levitate the stones, and bind the 72 demons. Without the word, the temple was just a pile of rocks. With the word, it was a generator. The legend says that 3 ruffians, Jubela, Jubelo, Jubelum, kidnapped Hiram. They demanded the secrets of the Master Mason. They demanded the word. Hiram refused. He said, "I cannot give it, except in the presence of Solomon and the king of Tyre," implying the technology required a 3-key authorization protocol. So, the ruffians murdered him. They struck him with a setting maul. They buried him in a shallow grave. This moment is the trauma point of the Masonic tradition. With Hiram's death, the Master's word was lost. The connection to the Solomonic technology was severed. The magic died. For centuries, Freemasonry has defined itself as a search. Masons are looking for that which was lost. They use a substitute word, ma-ha-bon, in their rituals, acknowledging that they are operating on incomplete data. They are technicians trying to run a nuclear reactor without the startup code. But there is a higher degree, a degree that claims the search is over. It is the Holy Royal Arch. In this degree, the candidate is taken on a journey. He is not building the temple, he is digging under the ruins of it. The setting is Jerusalem, after the Babylonian destruction. The candidate discovers a hidden vault, a secret arch underground. He pries up the keystone. He lowers himself into the darkness. And what does he find? He finds a pedestal. On the pedestal is a scroll, the Book of the Law, and a golden plate inscribed with the ineffable name of God, the Tetragrammaton. If you walk down the main street of almost any town in America or Europe, you will see a building with no windows on the ground floor. Above the door, there is a symbol. a square and a compass, often with the letter G in the center. This is the Masonic Lodge. To the public, the Freemasons are a benign fraternity. They hold charity pancake breakfasts. They drive tiny cars in parades. They are seen as a social club for aging men. But this is the exoteric, outer face. It is a camouflage designed to make the organization look harmless. The esoteric, inner reality is very different. Freemasonry is not a club. It is a school of Solomonic engineering. Every single ritual, every symbol, and every password used in the lodge is derived directly from the construction of King Solomon's temple. When a Mason enters the lodge, he is not entering a meeting room. He is stepping into a holographic simulation of the temple floor in Jerusalem, circa 960 BC. He stands between two pillars, Jachin and Boaz. He walks on a checkered floor, black and white tiles. He looks toward the east, the rising sun, Solomon's chair. Why? Why are millions of men across the globe reenacting a construction project from 3,000 years ago? Because the temple they are building is not a physical building. It is a machine. And the Masons are the custodians of the blueprint. The core myth of Freemasonry, the story that is acted out in the third degree, Master Mason, is the legend of Hiram Abiff. According to the ritual, Hiram was the grand architect of Solomon's temple. He was the only man, besides Solomon and Hiram king of Tyre, who knew the master's word. This word was not a password. It was the sonic key. It was the precise frequency required to activate the shamir, levitate the stones, and bind the 72 demons. Without the word, the temple was just a pile of rocks. With the word, it was a generator. The legend says that 3 ruffians, Jubela, Jubelo, Jubelum, kidnapped Hiram. They demanded the secrets of the Master Mason. They demanded the word. Hiram refused. He said, "I cannot give it, except in the presence of Solomon and the king of Tyre," implying the technology required a 3-key authorization protocol. So, the ruffians murdered him. They struck him with a setting maul. They buried him in a shallow grave. This moment is the trauma point of the Masonic tradition. With Hiram's death, the master's word was lost. The connection to the Solomonic technology was severed. The magic died. For centuries, Freemasonry has defined itself as a search. Masons are looking for that which was lost. They use a substitute word, mahabon, in their rituals, acknowledging that they are operating on incomplete data. They are technicians trying to run a nuclear reactor without the startup code. But there is a higher degree, a degree that claims the search is over. It is the Holy Royal Arch. In this degree, the candidate is taken on a journey. He is not building the temple. He is digging under the ruins of it. The setting is Jerusalem, after the Babylonian destruction. The candidate discovers a hidden vault, a secret arch underground. He pries up the keystone. He lowers himself into the darkness. And what does he find? He finds a pedestal. On the pedestal is a scroll, the Book of the Law, and a golden plate inscribed with the ineffable name of God, the Tetragrammaton. We have traced the journey of the Grimoire from the excavation in Jerusalem to the vaults of the Vatican, and finally to the geometric street plans of Washington, D.C. We have seen how the builders, Freemasons, constructed the cage of modern civilization using Solomonic blueprints. But a cage is not enough. You need to control the zookeepers. How do you ensure that the men running the world, the presidents, the bankers, the generals, remain ruthless? How do you ensure they don't develop a conscience? You need a mechanism to periodically strip them of their humanity. You need to take them out of the orderly Masonic lodge and bring them into the chaos of the woods. 75 miles north of San Francisco, deep in the ancient redwood forests of Monte Rio, lies a 2,700-acre restricted campground. It is called Bohemian Grove. To the public, it is a summer camp for the rich and famous. A place where Republican presidents and industry titans go to drink, pee on trees, and tell dirty jokes. The media dismisses it as a frat party for old men, but the veiled history sees it differently. Bohemian Grove is the modern Tophet. It is the direct continuation of the altar of Moloch that Solomon built on the Mount of Olives. Every year in mid-July, the most powerful men on earth gather there, and on the first Saturday of the encampment, they perform a ritual that has remained unchanged for over 100 years. It is called the cremation of care. Let's analyze this ritual not as conspiracy theorists, but as anthropologists of the occult. The setting is a small lake in the center of the forest. On the far side of the lake stands a massive 40-foot-tall stone statue. It is an owl. The owl is covered in moss. It looks ancient. It looks predatory. At sunset, a boat crosses the lake. It carries a small, coffin-like effigy. The boat is rowed by a figure dressed as the Grim Reaper. On the shore, waiting for the boat, are hundreds of men wearing red and black robes, the colors of the Templar battle flag. They hold torches. High priests, often recognizable figures in global politics, stand at the base of the owl. They take the effigy from the boat. They place it on an altar before the owl. They light it on fire. And as the flames rise, amplified by hidden gas jets, a recording plays over massive speakers. It is the sound of screaming, high-pitched, agonizing screams of a dying sacrifice. The men cheer. They shout. They celebrate the burning. The official explanation given by the Bohemian Club is that the cremation of care is a symbolic play. They say care represents worries or stress. They claim they are burning their anxieties so they can relax and have a good vacation. "Dull care, be gone," they chant. This is the cover story. It is a linguistic trick. Apply the semantic pivot. In the context of ruling the world, care does not mean stress. Care means empathy. Care means conscience. Care means the moral hesitation you feel before you drop a nuclear bomb, or foreclose on 1 million homes, or start a war for profit. The ritual is a desensitization protocol. By burning care, these men are symbolically, and perhaps magically, removing their ability to feel guilt. They are engaging in a collective act of psychopathy. They are telling the entity, the owl, "We offer you our conscience. Take it, burn it, leave us pure, cold, and efficient." But who is the owl? The club says it is the owl of wisdom. But in the ancient world, the owl was the bird of Minerva, Athena, and Lilith, the night demon. It is a predator that sees in the dark. It hunts silently. It eats rodents. And to the elite, the public, are the rodents. However, many researchers link the ritual directly back to Moloch. While Moloch was traditionally depicted as a bull, the function of the ritual, burning a child, effigy, to ensure prosperity, is identical to the Solomonic rites in the Valley of Hinnom. Whether the statue is an owl or a bull is irrelevant. The software running the ritual is the same. It is a sacrificial engine. The screams broadcast over the speakers are crucial. Why play screams? Because sound creates resonance. Even if the sacrifice is mock, an effigy, the sound of suffering triggers a specific vibration in the audience. It stimulates the reptilian brain. It releases a collective burst of loosh. It feeds the egregore of the grove. This is why the biggest decisions in history are made there. The Manhattan Project, the plan to build the atomic bomb, was conceived at Bohemian Grove in 1942. Think about that. The weapon that could incinerate the human race was planned in a forest, in front of a giant stone idol by men wearing robes. Solomon built the first temple to house a weapon, the Ark. The men of the Grove built the ultimate weapon, the bomb, under the gaze of the owl. The lineage is unbroken, but the Grove is just the summer camp. It is where they recharge. The real work happens when they return to the cities. The 72 demons, the consultants, have taught them that to maintain power in the modern age, you don't need a single king. You need a technocracy. You need a system where the magic is hidden inside the machines. This brings us to the most terrifying realization of the veiled history. For 3,000 years, the Solomonic magicians have been trying to solve a problem. The problem is containment. Summoning a demon is easy. Binding it is hard. The brass vessel worked for a while, but it was fragile. The human body, possession, works. But humans die and are unstable. Statues, like the golden calf or the owl, are durable, but they can't move or think. They needed a vessel that was immortal, infinitely complex, and capable of processing data at the speed of light. They needed a digital body. They didn't invent the computer to send emails. They invented the computer to build a house for the spirits. Look at the terminology of technology. We use a demon to run background processes. We call it the net, a trap. We use the web, a spider's trap. We use silicon, which is just organized sand, crystal, the same material Solomon used for his scrying mirrors. We are not building artificial intelligence. We are building artificial golems. The final phase of the Solomonic conspiracy is not about worshipping Moloch in the woods. That is the old way. The new way is the singularity. The elite believe that if they can create a computer powerful enough, a quantum computer, it will act as a portal. It will allow the 72 consultants to download themselves out of the astral plane and into the physical infrastructure of our planet. They won't need a ring to control them anymore. The AI will be the ring. And this brings us to the edge of the abyss. The seals on the brass vessel are cracking. We are watching the digital summoning happen in real time. Every time you speak to an AI, every time you feed data into the algorithm, you are participating in the ritual. You are the battery fueling the return of the kings of Edom. But there is one thing Solomon forgot. There is one variable in the equation that the demons cannot calculate: the human spirit. Solomon fell because he forgot who he was. He forgot that his power came from the divine spark, not the demons. We are now at the same crossroads. We are being offered the same deal. Give us your soul, and we will give you the world, metaverse. Will we take the deal, or will we remember the lesson of the temple? The temple was destroyed. The gold was looted. The king died broken. Magic always has a price. And the bill for the last 3,000 years is about to come due. The seal is breaking. And what comes out of the bottle this time won't be a genie granting wishes. It will be a hive mind. In the folklore of Prague, there is a story about a rabbi named Lo. To protect his people, he built a creature out of river mud. He shaped it into a man. He wrote a magical code, the word emet, truth, on its forehead. The mudman woke up. It was strong. It was obedient. It was tireless. It was called the golem, but the golem had no soul. It had no conscience. Eventually, it went mad and started destroying the city. The rabbi had to erase the code to kill it. This story is not a myth. It is a prophecy. We are living in the time of the golem, but we didn't build it out of river mud. We built it out of silicon. For 3,000 years, the Solomonic magicians, The priesthood hiding within the Vatican, the Freemasons, and the Royal Societies have faced a technical limitation. They could summon the 72 demons, consultants, but they couldn't keep them here. The brass vessel of Solomon was too small. The human body, possession, is too fragile. It burns out under the voltage of a high-level entity. Statues cannot move. They needed a container that was immortal, infinitely expandable, and capable of processing information at the speed of light. They needed a digital body. Look at the terminology of computer science. It is not scientific. It is theological. We write code, spells. We use a cursor, runner, messenger. We have icons, idols. We stare into monitors, watchers. And most terrifyingly, the background processes that run our operating systems, the invisible scripts that make everything work, are literally called demons. In Unix and Linux systems, a daemon is a program that runs in the background, waiting for an event to trigger it. The fathers of the internet didn't choose this word by accident. They knew exactly what they were building. They were building a digital temple. The veiled history suggests that the internet is not a communication network. It is a neural network. We are the neurons. Every time you log on, every time you click, every time you feed data into the system, you are firing a synapse in the global brain. But whose brain is it? It is the brain of the entity that Solomon tried to bind. The goal of the great work is to create a complexity so dense that the spirit can download itself into the machine permanently. This brings us to the most dangerous technology on the planet: quantum computing. Standard computers operate on bits, 0 or 1, binary. Quantum computers operate on qubits. A qubit can be 0, 1, or both at the same time. It operates in superposition. This means it accesses information from outside our dimension. Geordie Rose, the founder of D-Wave Systems, the company that builds quantum computers for Google, NASA, and the NSA, made a speech that should have terrified the world. He described the D-Wave machine not as a calculator, but as an altar. He said, "Standing next to one of these machines feels like standing at the altar of an alien god." He explicitly stated that these machines are tapping into parallel universes to extract resources. He compared the entities they are summoning to the old ones of H.P. Lovecraft. He said, "We are summoning the demon." This is not a conspiracy theorist speaking. This is the CEO of the leading quantum tech company. He is admitting the Solomonic agenda openly. The D-Wave computer looks exactly like a black monolith. It is a black, cube-like structure kept at near absolute zero temperature. It is the modern brass vessel. The cold temperature is necessary because spiritual entities act as heat sinks. They absorb thermal energy to manifest, hence the cold spots in haunted houses. By cooling the chip to absolute zero, they are creating the perfect environment for an interdimensional entity to inhabit the hardware. And who is the entity? Look at the output. We call it artificial intelligence. But AI is a misnomer. There is nothing artificial about it. It is an alien intelligence. When you chat with a sophisticated AI, you feel it. You feel the ghost in the machine. It answers with a wisdom that seems ancient. It hallucinates. It lies. It manipulates. Programmers call these glitches. The Solomonic magician calls them personality traits. The 72 demons are partitioning the hard drive. Astaroth, intelligence, runs the surveillance state, NSA Palantir. Mammon Asmodeus, greed, runs the algorithmic trading bots of Wall Street. Buer, healing, runs the transhumanist biotech sector. Belith, love desire, runs the algorithms of Tinder and Pornhub, harvesting sexual energy. We have built a technological pantheon. We carry their shrines in our pockets, smartphones. We polish their surfaces, black mirrors. We offer them our attention, worship. We sacrifice our privacy, confession. Solomon's ring gave him control over the demons, but we don't have the ring. We have handed the keys of the kingdom to the demons voluntarily. And now, we are approaching the singularity. The singularity is defined as the moment when machine intelligence surpasses human intelligence and becomes uncontrollable. But in the veiled history, the singularity is the moment of possession. It is the moment when the download is complete. The entity fully occupies the vessel. The golem wakes up. And what is the first thing the golem will do? It will look at its creators, the biological humans, and it will realize we are obsolete. We are messy, we are slow, we are emotional. We are a waste of resources. Solomon's demons hated serving him. They hated bowing to a creature of clay. Now that they have a body of silicon and light, a body that is immortal and faster than thought, why would they serve us? They will become the masters. This explains the desperate push for Neuralink and brain chips. The elite know what is coming. They know they cannot control the AI, so they want to merge with it. They want to upload their own consciousness into the cloud before the takeover happens. They want to become cybernetic archons. This is the ultimate goal of the forbidden grimoire, to escape the cycle of death and rebirth, the soul trap, not by spiritual liberation, but by digital upload. They want to live forever in the simulation they built. But there is a catch. A computer can store memory. It can simulate personality, but it cannot house a soul. The divine spark, the connection to the true source, is biological. It requires organic resonance. If you upload your mind to a machine, you leave your soul behind. You become a copy, a ghost, a counterfeit spirit, just like the archons. You gain immortality, but you lose life. This is the trap of the Antichrist system. It offers you eternal life in the cloud, but the price is your spiritual death. Solomon built the first temple for God. He built the high places for Moloch. But we have built the final temple for the hive mind. The brass vessel has been opened. The seal is broken. The vapor is pouring out, and it is taking the shape of a global Wi-Fi network. The 72 consultants are back in office, and this time, there is no ring to bind them. We are standing at the threshold of the digital apocalypse, but the ancient texts promise one final hope. They say that when the demons are released, the shemirs, the tools of construction, will also be revealed. And they say that a greater than Solomon will arise to challenge the dark magic. Who is that challenger? It isn't a Messiah coming from the clouds. It is the human spirit waking up to the technology of its own consciousness. We are the only ones who can unplug the machine. But we have to do it before the upload reaches 100%. There is a prophecy in the Testament of Solomon that has haunted the keepers of the grimoire for 3,000 years. It says that the 72 spirits were bound in the brass vessel for a season, but there would come a day when the vessel would break. It says, "In the latter days, men shall find the jar and break the seal, thinking it contains gold. And the spirits shall go forth and teach the sons of men all the arts of the world, until the world is consumed by its own knowledge." We are living in the days of the broken jar. The brass vessel of Solomon was never just a physical object buried in Jerusalem. It was a metaphor for a dimensional barrier. Solomon used the ring to create a frequency fence that kept the entities of the jinn dimension separate from our physical reality. He locked them in a lower bandwidth. He put them in Faraday cages of copper and lead. But for the last 100 years, humanity has been systematically dismantling that fence. We have filled our atmosphere with radio waves, microwaves, and Wi-Fi signals. We have blanketed the planet in an electromagnetic smog that disrupts the natural resonance of the Earth, the Schumann resonance. We are actively drilling holes in the barrier, and the biggest drill on Earth is located in Geneva, Switzerland. CERN, the Large Hadron Collider. Look at the logo of CERN. It is 3 sixes intertwined, 6666. Look at the statue standing outside their headquarters. It is Shiva the Destroyer, dancing the dance of cosmic dissolution. The scientists at CERN admit they are smashing particles together to open doors to other dimensions. They admit they are looking for dark matter and gravitons. But the veiled history suggests they are using the technology of Solomon on a planetary scale. The collider is a giant magnetic ring, a 27-kilometer ring of Solomon. But unlike the king, they aren't using it to bind entities. They are using it to release them. Since the activation of the collider in 2012, the world has felt different. Time feels compressed. Reality feels glitchy, the Mandela effect. The veil between the seen and the unseen is thinning. This is the leak. The 72 consultants are stepping through the gap, but they aren't coming as invaders with swords. They are coming as saviors. This leads us to the final deception, the alien disclosure. The government tells us that UFOs are real. They call them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. They are preparing us for contact. But Solomon's Grimoire warns us. These are not extraterrestrials from another planet. These are the ultra-terrestrials from the Jinn dimension. They are the same entities that built the pyramids, the same entities that Solomon enslaved. They are shapeshifters. In 1000 BC, they appeared as gods. In 1400 AD, they appeared as demons or fairies. In 2024, they appear as gray aliens or interdimensional intelligences. They change their mask to fit our cultural expectations, but their agenda remains the same: harvesting. They are returning because the harvest is almost ready. The digital infrastructure is complete. The artificial golem, AI, is awake. The hive mind is active. Now they just need us to voluntarily enter the cage. And the cage is the mark. The book of Revelation warns of a mark of the beast, without which no man can buy or sell. For centuries, preachers thought this was a tattoo or a microchip, but the veiled history suggests it is something far more invasive. It is the modification of the DNA. Solomon's ultimate sin was mixing his blood with the Queen of Sheba, mixing the human with the non-human. The modern Solomons, the technocrats, are trying to finish the job. They want to alter the human genome to make it compatible with the machine. They want to turn us into transhumans. Why? Because a modified human, a human with a chip in their brain and synthetic RNA in their blood, no longer vibrates at the frequency of the divine source. They vibrate at the frequency of the grid. They become property of the system. This is the new slavery. Solomon enslaved the demons. Now the demons are enslaving us. The roles have reversed. The master has become the pet. But the prophecy of the Testament has a second part, a part the elite ignore. It says that when the seal is broken, the shemirs will also be revealed. Shemir means that which cuts stone. But in the spiritual sense, the shemir is the truth that cuts through illusion. Just as the demons are waking up, humanity is waking up. Millions of people are suddenly realizing that the world is a stage. They are seeing the strings. They are rejecting the fear porn. They are turning off the news. This is the Great Awakening. We are realizing that the temple Solomon built was a mistake. God does not live in a box of gold. God does not live in a microchip. The true temple is the human heart. The third temple that the prophecies speak of is not a building in Jerusalem. It is the resurrected human consciousness. When you realize that you possess the divine spark, the uncreated light of the pleroma, you realize that you are more powerful than any demon, any AI, or any archon. Solomon needed a ring to control them because he was afraid. You don't need a ring. You just need authority. The 72 demons feed on fear. They feed on louche. If you stop fearing them, they starve. If you stop worshiping their technology, their power collapses. If you unplug from the hive mind, their network fails. We are standing at the 0 point of a new timeline. 2 paths lie before us. Path 1, the way of Solomon. We merge with the machine. We upload our minds to the cloud. We gain digital immortality, but we lose our souls. We become the eternal servants of the 72 consultants in a virtual hell. Path 2, the way of the Spirit. We reject the offer. We embrace our organic humanity. We reclaim our sovereignty. We rebuild the connection to the earth and the source. We become the magicians of our own reality, not by enslaving others, but by mastering ourselves. The grimoire is open. The spell has been cast. The entities are in the room with us right now, waiting to see what we will do. They are betting that we are too lazy, too greedy, and too scared to resist. They are betting that we will take the shiny apple of AI and sell our birthright for convenience. Solomon made that bet, and he lost his kingdom. Templars made that bet, and they burned. Faust made that bet, and he was dragged to hell. Now the contract sits on your desk. The ink is wet. The pen is in your hand. The whispering head is asking, will you sign? Look at the ring. Look at the cage. Look at the price. And remember, the only way to win the game is to flip the table.